As we've been discussing, there are three types of government. There's an autocratic, an oligarchy, and a democracy. The three types of government are basically how citizens participate. Do they participate at all, or do they get to participate in the government? In an autocracy, just like the word shows, auto means one, like an automobile means there's one driver. In an autocratic government or an autocracy, there's one leader. Oftentimes it's a dictator or an absolute monarchy, which is a king or queen. In an oligarchy, it's a small group of people, and it's usually two or more. They're usually wealthy or well-educated, and that's how they control the country. In either an autocracy or an oligarchy, citizens participate very little if they get to participate at all. So there's very little participation in both 1 and 2. In a democracy, citizens participate by voting. They get to say and express their viewpoints through the voting process. If they don't like what's happening, they can vote in or out different representatives. We're going to be focusing on the two types of democratic governments, and that is parliamentary and presidential. In a parliamentary government, like in a presidential, citizens participate by voting, as we just discussed. The three probably best examples that we'll study this year is Canada, that represent a parliamentary democracy, Australia has a parliamentary democracy, and the United Kingdom, the UK, has a parliamentary democracy. In the presidential type of government in a democracy is what the United States has, and that's the one that we're probably most familiar with because our government is based on that. In looking at the differences between a parliamentary system and a presidential system, it really comes down to how the citizens vote. In a parliamentary system, the citizens vote like they do in a presidential, but they vote once. Okay, I'll repeat that. They vote once. They're voting for their legislature or the lawmaking body. Then once that group is voted in, that group of people then decides, the majority party selects their leader, which the executive branch in a parliamentary democracy is oftentimes a prime minister, but it can be a chancellor or a president as well, but oftentimes the title is a prime minister. In a presidential system, the citizen is voting, but they're voting for two different branches. Again, they're voting for two different branches. The citizens are voting for their lawmakers who make the laws of the country, and that's how the country is run, based on law, but they're also voting on their executive. So they're directly electing the executive, and they're electing the legislative branch. They're voting for two different branches. In a parliamentary system, they're still voting, and that's why it's democracy, but they're voting for the legislative branch only. And then from that group, they then pick their leader or their prime minister oftentimes. So again, just to sum up, in a parliamentary system, citizens vote one time for the legislative or the lawmaking body, and then from that group, they then pick their leader. And in a presidential system, the citizens vote for both branches, the executive branch or the president, and the lawmaking body, the legislative branch. That's really the big difference between them. Don't get caught up with whether it's a president, a chancellor, or a prime minister. The big way to know if it's a parliamentary system is, are they voting for the legislative branch, and then from there the legislative branch then picks their leader. That's the hallmark or the characteristic of a parliamentary system.